Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I'm here with Krista, Toby, and Nick. Krista, we were talking just before recording, and you had a really interesting story, which I think is going to sort of kick these things off.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. We'll talk about the ability to identify power skills within the interviewing process. And I think we can all accept that going forward, the power skills, soft skills, whatever you want to call them, are going to be so vital to identifying potential candidates because they're the skills of the future in order to navigate the unpredictable futures, adapt to the changes, unprecedented changes that we're continually facing. And recently, despite being within a recruitment company, was left to my own devices to recruit someone to join the marketing team. And I was like, let's go for personality fit. Let's see what she's done before. And ultimately, when the person joined us, it was clear that was a skills gap, that these power skills that we often take for granted were missing. And there was an inability not an inability, but there was a gap within the recruitment process that I created that didn't test for those power skills. And had we implemented something that was going to do that, it would have saved 3 months of working with the wrong person, and obviously then having delay in having that marketing support. So I think being able to find those skills was really important. And on reflection, I was like, why haven't we used cChange in order to test those skills? Why have we not used this great platform that we have super close access to identify the skills within the candidate? So yeah, that was my learning going forward.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because in the recruitment industry for years has struggled to find recruiters. Technically, right? There's businesses rec to recs, or recruiters to recruiters, people who recruit for recruiters. And the reason the whole industry is there is just think, well, you should be good at it. You should be good at finding people, right? But the actual process of finding and vetting individuals for any type of role is something that takes understanding and knowledge of what that role entails, and to actually vet for that properly. I remember back, and actually, for those that don't know, the viewers don't know, my first interview before I got into the recruitment world, my telephone interview was with Jez. So he was. I hadn't applied through him, or it wasn't a job for his team. But he was just one of the managers that does the telephone interviews, and he got assigned to me out of the 12 or 15 interviews that they were doing at the time. It's probably more than that because they bring 10 people through at any time. But yeah, and the whole interview process, and we're talking, 15 years ago now, the whole interview process was telephone interview, come in for a day of interviews, and in total I had 8 interviews in one day. Then we had to come into a day for actually physically doing a trial day, so physically doing the job. And in the recruitment world back then, it was we had all the candidates' information was on a little slip of paper, and you had to spend all day calling through this call list, and filling in the bits of paper. And I remember handing all of the pieces of paper to this manager at the end of the day, and he just sat back in his chair and just dropped them off in the bin. And I was like, that's a whole day's work, and you just put it in the bin. Like, what on earth is going on? And the whole when I spoke about this when I moved into the management team there, and it's the whole thing was, Nick, we didn't really care about what the work you performed for that day. What we cared about was the way you applied yourself to the tasks at hand, the way you responded to various different people and interacted with various different people in the business, and actually, did everyone feel that you have certain skills that would actually make you fit and make you a good recruiter in the long run? So the point of those 8 different people was a diverse opinion over whether these individuals had the soft skills to be resilient, to be adaptive, to not be feared by situations that they get dropped into. Now, that means that there was 8 senior people spending a lot of time and lots of business effort into trying to recruit for one person, and not everyone succeeds in that industry, right? So there's a lot of time and effort and money. So how do we do that quicker? How do we do that when we're faced with busy businesses that mean we've got diaries full anyway? And I think that's the real challenge. I think for years we've known what we know we needed to do it, but how to execute it is the challenging part. I just rambled on for ages there.
No,
but
you didn't.
hopefully
I think it's
that's-
interesting what you're talking about, because it's we're just talking about before we came on the kind of analogy where in the car industry, when you release a car to the market, it has to go to a testing ground. It has to be tested. You
Yeah.
know, it has to be put through a whole series of parameters to make sure that one, it performs like it says on the tin, right, and two, that it can cope with all the rigor of doing that. And I was thinking about the same for pilots in an aircraft, right? That they're constantly having to get a license. And I think the thing that's happening now is that POWERskills are becoming one of the biggest leverage points for competitive advantage within a company. It's becoming recognizable that their biggest weakness is the soft skills within an organization. But we don't have any pilot license for it. We don't have any proof statement. I know that we do have these things. I've seen it happening whereby you can be qualified in soft skills because you've done a PowerPoint training course, and you're even qualified to teach soft skills because you've done a PowerPoint training course. And I've seen this. But that really is not the sort of thing what we're talking about. So the real difference here is that if you use the simulation, if we use the cChange products, depending on what angle you want to take, is it going to be crisis management? Is it purely around leadership? Is it around teamwork? Right? What you see is what you get. Within 10 minutes of somebody being on and a team being on, you know whether they have it or not. 10 minutes.
You
We
can't fake
know.
it, can you?
Yeah, you can't fake it till you make it in this. You can be humble. You can do exactly what the manager told Nick when they were looking for. What we're looking for is characteristics that we can work with. All right. So you may even take somebody on who doesn't have the skill set, right? But we think we can grow them. And that's what we did with you, Eric, right? When we had our post-interview training, so everybody knows that Eric is a founder and shareholder of the business that we work in. But when he joined us, he was an intern,
Basically, yeah.
right? Yeah. Who couldn't play video games, which was really sad. But that's another point.
You wish.
There's two interesting points from that. I think, firstly, you're right. It's you can having done coached the game with many teams now. It's you pick up on things, you observe things, and you see how people respond to an unknown scenario, right? An unknown. They know what the objective is. They can see some of the challenges in front of them, but they're now thrown into handling with different people. How do they interact with a team, right? And I think it's quite common to think, oh, we're just looking in that group of people for the leader. We're looking for the person who steps forward and takes leadership. But sometimes, depending on your role, that's not what you're actually looking for, right? That actually, that I've been in some of the coaching sessions where there's been one individual who's sat relatively quietly in the background, analysing the information, checking what's there. And then as the team are yip-yapping away and trying to go and talk over each other, they've actually stepped forward and said, 1 minute, before we do that, I read this. Should we think about doing this first? Or should we do that? And they're taking calculated measures and approaches and analysing what's going on before taking things forward. Now, so I think you can really, between that team, look and adapt and find various different characteristics that are right for the role that you're hiring for. And that were just what you're interviewing for. The second point, I think, is what you said about there's no certification for it. We've been doing a data ethics project recently, and it's the same concept in that we're talking about subjective matters here, right? Ethics is subjective to a certain degree, how well someone can communicate is subjective, because people communicate different ways with different people. So how do you start to test and score that is a subjective opinion. And you can only do that with looking at observation and taking a diverse expertise and range of opinions that formulate an aggregate of answers. So in cChange, in the game, when we're doing the coaching, we don't just say, "Oh yeah, your team was a 2." That's how we scored them. They've certified, they're passed, they're an excellent communicator. No, what we have to do is over time and over multiple tests, people take different scores and we aggregate those scores to get a generalized picture of whether this person has these skills or not.
And
That's
the
really
progression as well, which is very
Yeah,
important.
well, you're not going to have a 3-month interview process. We want you to play the game 3 months, 3 months, every month.
no, but
We'll score you that way.
no, but what it does
Yeah.
do. Sorry, Eric, go on.
No. Well, I think there's sort of something that was running around in the back of my head from throughout this conversation is one of the key points that you're describing, especially with the example you were giving, Nick, of your interview, is what they were doing there is they were putting you in a simulation. They were putting you in an environment where you thought you were doing something. They were actually testing you for something else. And that is extremely important. What we do with the game is kind of similar, but because what we're testing are skills that are extremely relevant to the business, but we're making you use them in an environment that is not apparently, at least not immediately apparently, relevant to the business. And what that allows, it basically, we get this thing where we're conditioned when we go in for an interview, a test, or anything. We think it's going to go a certain way, and we act accordingly. We're basically breaking that and
psychometric testing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, psychometric testing. Do you know how many psychometric tests I've taken over the years? And do you know what? Depending on what model you use, I know my result. Yeah, I know what my result is. I know what test bit I'm in. What bracket I'm in. Just bloody ask me which one am I, and I'll tell you. We don't have to go through this another test that you've taken from some internet source that's got some other things. And yes, they do. There's psychology behind them. They do show, a certain element. But how does a business translate those models into, that means they've got the right skills to do the jobs that we need, is a massive missing part in any interview process that includes psychometric tests. I've used them in recruitment before, and I've rejected people because something is said in the report, and I've gone, I'm not really comfortable with that. Like, is that mean they're going to be like this? Does that mean they're going to be like that? I had no idea what they're going to actually like. And you get bias in those tests and stuff like that. So you're right. It's if we're thinking about getting people to think about that, they think that the task is one thing, and that allows us to observe for something like secondary to that, then we're seeing their natural behaviour.
Exactly.
But if you look at the top 5 techniques you can use in order to assess these power skills, you've got behavioural interview questions, you've got situational judgment tests, group interviews and assessment centres, personality and psychometric assessments, I think I've lost count, but also behavioural observation. And on the side of that, you've got reference checks. So how much attention do we actually pay to reference checks? Because there's all sorts of complications and ambiguities. Someone isn't allowed to. You're not allowed to say something negative in a reference check anymore. So therefore, it's just like, throw that out. It's almost irrelevant unless it's very factual on what they've achieved. Behavioural interview questions. How would you behave on this? Well, in this situation, I would do this. Ideal answer, tick. In reality, with external pressures, do you actually do what you say you do? So actually getting people involved in that simulation and seeing their behaviour in action, having that behavioural observation, actually ticks so many of those boxes within one play. And by having that coached element of observation and feedback, you don't need 8 of those business leaders on the call, being there, spending time, and obviously the associated cost, because you've got your coach who can report back and go, this is what you were after. here's my feedback, here's my recommendations, here's the strengths and weaknesses that we observed. That's powerful.
And here's a video of it if you'd like to see them in action.
Yeah.
You're
There,
like,
there was
wow.
there was a coach session we done recently with an organisation, and it was an on-site one rather than a virtual one, but someone was off ill, and so we had a missing space, and literally as we were walking through the reception, the manager just stopped another manager and said, "Hey, we've got this game simulation, business simulation thing going on, about data skills and soft skills. Anyone in your team free now to spend the next hour and a half on the game?" And he then stopped someone else in his team walking past and said, "Oh, you can do this. You want to do this? Get involved." And the lady came in, and to the point where she sat at the table and she looked around and she said, "Oh, do you all work at this business?" She didn't even realise that these people in the team had worked in the same organisation as her, and instantly, without thinking, she integrated herself into that team of 5 and was a valuable member to their success and the progression they made in the game. And it's like things like that you look at and you go, and like I said, she wasn't the most vocal, she wasn't the person who sat back, but she wasn't the most vocal, she wasn't this, but she was able to be dropped into a scenario with people that she didn't even know that were part of her business and actually make a contribution that created some success and some progression. It's that kind of stuff
But
that you
there's
can't
stories like
test.
that. The stories like that are there's a because in we've got similar sort of experiences. Um, the two parts to this. We were doing a large part of an organization. We were doing soft skills
Yeah,
and teamwork training. We were doing accreditation for coaches. At the same time, we're doing this face-to-face big hotel. We owned the whole first floor, multiple rooms. And the two parts of the feedback. The first part of the feedback was when we did the wash up at the end of the day. Was for the first time. These were people that had been there 20 odd years and had never met. Sales, legal, accounting, and they said it's fantastic now because the game has taught us to understand what it's like to work in a multidisciplinary team. I understand why sales is like this. I understand why legal says things like this because we've started working together. And that sort of gets that power skills, that ability to have a shared empathy means that we're all on the same page with how we're working together collectively. Gets sort of summarized into this situation, and I'm sure I've told this story before. I'm bound to, but it's still a one the where we're all quite shocked about, Eric, when it happened. Was there was this young in particularly in France, there's a concept of cadre, right? Mispronounced by me, but that basically means there's a management level that you are qualified nationally in, right? We don't have it in the UK. We talk about managers and that, but this actually is a legal status in France. You are officer status and above, and below you're not, right? Depending on your qualifications and whether the organisation. And with that comes duties and responsibilities, etc. It's a um, it's a thing left over from Code Napoleon, right, where they tried to focus on merit in driving promotion in organizations, and it still exists. But anyway, there was this girl, this young lady, who came in, who was not cadre, right, and she was really timid and she was really scared because around her were all cadre and very senior for her in the organization, and they dressed like they were senior and they acted like her. She was the first person, though, that was nominated to lead a team through the simulation. And she was brilliant. I mean, to say she was brilliant, she left people gobsmacked. And she did. And she just suddenly, this switch happened. This new person appeared because it was semi anonymous in what you could do. And so nobody beat her score that day, believe me. They tried. They were all, these were training experts. Top, nobody beat her, right? The DRS, the director of human resources there, couldn't believe it. And he came up to me and said, I'm promoting her to cadre because I've seen her do this, right? And her colleagues couldn't be, nobody could catch her. They went, that day that she'd come in, she'd been timid, could hardly say her. She came in the following day. It's a tradition in France. You shake everybody's hand or you do bisous. Right? You shake it. She came around 20 people, again like that. She was blossoming. She was just there was like night and day, right? And that was caused by a video game. Right? Do you
It's
see what I
interesting.
mean?
This in the simulations and coaching sessions, and this comes back to when we're interviewing people, right? One of the things we need to realize is everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has their good days and bad days at work, and actually some people don't have, some people there's skills that we need to teach people, particularly when it comes to technical recruitment or technical or even in like marketing, that sort of. So we have disciplines for a reason, and you need to learn your discipline, I think. But what you look for in that is you want someone who can be reflective and self-aware on their own challenges, problems, and communicate those very well to other people so you can provide them with the right support they need as an individual and to help them grow. Right, realistically, right? If everyone was able to stand up and say, "Hey, look, I've analysed myself and what I've done here. I think this is wrong. Can I have support or some help or some training on A, B, and C? And then I think I can do it better moving forward. And this is the best way I train." Right? Of course, everyone's going to talk in that manner, but we want people who are self-reflective, can be self-critical, both positive and negative, and communicate that with others. And my most interesting part when I'm coaching through the game is when the team have done their session, the very first piece of coaching that I do is I ask them, how successful was your team? And I very clearly don't say any other words, don't give any other guidance or advice. And I see the responses I get. Now, it's interesting. Some teams can over elevate their role of success and think they've done really well, and they make loads of, I'd say, excuses as to why they performed very well. When we bring it back to their
You
objectives
mean
and
not very well or very well?
why they done very well, they think they done very well. But
Right.
when we bring it back to their and I don't want to give too much about the simulation away, but ultimately the very first session we set a quite a far objective, but within that there are mini objectives that you can achieve to show progression. This team, I would say, hadn't even got to the very first milestone of any kind of success. Yet they seemed to think that they were very, very successful, that they worked very well together, that they'd done all this stuff. And they were pulling out all these positives about how successful they were. Not one person could highlight a negative. Some of the other teams I talk to, they say, "Oh, we done awful," and they could have got quite far. We done awful. We didn't do this. We didn't do that. And then someone will say, "Oh, but we did do that bit, and we did get to that right." And I think that was good. And I think it's that point for me that I find as a coach very interesting, because you're analysing and seeing how self-aware, self-critical someone is, and how they're able to communicate both their positives and their negatives from that perspective. So, and I think if you try and, I mean, we always ask in an interview, don't you? You know, what's your worst trait? What's your strongest trait? You know, oh, tell me a time that you've had to be self-critical. You know, and we all make up this crap of stories that we prepare before we go into an interview. You know, so yeah, it's interesting. For me, that's the most important part,
But
and
I
it's like
think
that's
that
one of the key
can I
things we look for.
can I leave it? You began with the word self-awareness, and I would propose that most people have no awareness of their self.
Which is
That
strange because we're all very critical on ourselves. We were all our worst enemy,
no,
right?
that's
Go
a
back to our
habit.
other
Yeah, but
podcasts
that's
about
not
fear.
self-awareness. That's just negative mindset. That's in French habitude. That's not self-awareness. What's happened over time is that we've created a set of habits that are self-critical. That those habits are stronger than developing positive habits. Right? So that's I noticed, for instance, Christy, you were writing on LinkedIn sometime about the power of positive thought. Right? Okay. So when we talk about self-awareness, right, in the context that you're talking about, awareness of what? What is awareness? Awareness is experience, right? I'm not going to go down to a level of granularity, but awareness is consciousness of an object, whether I see something, ear hears something, nose smells, the mouth tastes, and then there's an internal representation of that. But the way to talk about it is there is experience, and your experience is organized into pre-established patterns, into habits. But if you don't know that, you're trapped by the habits. I'm going to repeat that.
Yeah,
Your experience, yeah. Go on.
it reminds me, going back to the interview process and then discovering that I wasn't particularly bang on with that. What I had gone into the process thinking was, I'm going to teach the hard skills. Anyone who comes in, I'm going to need to teach the hard skills because it's our bespoke systems. So that was like an upfront. So I just needed to go, is this person going to be a cultural fit? Can we work alongside each other? And that's what I was really looking for, of which I was very successful in that. The person that recruited was someone I could get on and work with and was able to pick up the hard skills. And I just completely ignored the soft skills. And I remember speaking to Jez and Matt afterwards and just instantly having that reflection and going, this is what I made the mistake. I made the mistake of not valuing my own soft
But
skills
what sort of,
in my job.
yes, you're in valuing, but one of the things that we talk about when we talk about training coaches, for example, is the concept of a closed and an open learning system. All right. And and you know, this is at a cultural level, and as well it's at a team level. What do you do with information? All right. Are you like the team that looks at information? We did do well. Right? Or are you the team that's not necessarily that is able to look at the information and make an assessment and say there's a gap, but not make it personal, which is what you began with, like that there's a skills gap in doing this, right? So when we talk about that experience is organized into pre-established patterns, if you know this, then what you experience, you can challenge. When a negative thought arises in your mind, you can say, I am not that thought. Right? And I can even overlay it with a positive one, right? So when you're trying to analyze in the game, the thing about the game is the obstacle is the path. There's 40 odd obstacles. It's not how good you are, it's how you face challenges and issues and obstacles that stress you as a team. And that stress point is where you see the real character of the people, which is the point of what you do when you test a car. You're stressing it to failure. When you're a pilot in an aircraft, you're testing them in things that happen that are that they have to be qualified for the unexpected, right? And typically go on, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to your story with the girl earlier on who just showed herself head and shoulder above her pay grade, if you like. It levels the playing field when you enter the space because it's immersive, because you're a character, you're not you. So you get to play a
But you've also
role.
never done it before. It's not based on business experience. It's not based on, oh well, you know, one person has led a marketing team and done A, B, and C, and one person hasn't. You're in the same zone, and it's that I'm talking about the not is it equity is equality. You see the image of the different, like the child and the adults, like watching a sports over a fence, and it's kind of like one of them gets a really big box and one of them gets a smaller box, and the idea is if you put them all on the same box, the small person still can't see over the fence, but you put them on a slightly higher box from there. Like you said, it gets rid of the fence completely and levels the piece in there.
Such an important point. All right, so the studies have done on this by IBM and Curiosity. All right. And one of the things that they, when they went and interviewed people who were playing multiplayers afterwards, and they put them into teams where you've got CEOs, you've got chief executive, human resources, marketing, mixed with junior people. And the whole of the senior team were led by a 17-year-old. They had no idea, right? Led brilliantly. and they let it happen. Because what happened in French is dépaysement, which means to be taken out of your habit.
Yeah.
It actually means to be taken out of your country.
Yeah.
But here, what I was saying, your experience is organized by pre-established patterns. I keep seeing that because those patterns are what lock you in. And if you walk into a business and you've got a conference room, and at the end, that's where the senior person sits and the others sit round, you know immediately, because you've been formatted and trained to keep your mouth shut, don't say the wrong things, all right, and follow the herd instinct. Even if
I
you
think,
know they're wrong.
sorry, I want to take back
So
something
just
that
one
Chrissy
second,
said.
when you go into the game, that's removed.
Yeah.
And it gives you the opportunity, what you're saying there, Nick, to analyze and say things, well, that allow something else to come out.
Yeah.
Right? But that also depends on the environment that you create for that in establishing it. Because we have had it when we did this in Germany, where the personality of the leader is so strong that it impinges all the opportunity for the others. So it has to, as you were saying, Nick, has to have a coach who sets the theme for this town. Sorry, Nick.
I want to pick up something Chris said earlier about the fact that she thought, oh, I can train the hard skills. I've got to get the cultural fit and the personality right. And this individual was a good cultural fit. Personality was brilliant. So there was no fault in that sense. I think it's an interesting point because quite often when we're talking about interviewing, we put focus on personality and cultural fit as I think as a mask to soft skills. I think we feel that if someone's a cultural fit and a good personality, that they're going to have the soft skills we need to fit in the business and work with the business. But I think there's a distinction between the hard skills, someone's personality and cultural fit, and then the soft skills needed to perform a role. And I think that's still something we miss. We talk about those elements, Chrissy, you mentioned, like personality testing, group interviews, all of those kind of reference checking, behavioral observation may be different, but you talk about those stuff. Most of the time when we're doing that, our question is, oh, do you reckon they'll fit in? Oh, do you reckon they'll add diversity to the team from their cultural perspective and give us this, different opinions? Do you reckon their personality fits in with everyone else? Will they get along with everyone? Can we work with them? Yeah, and that those aren't the soft skills we're talking about here, right? What we're talking about is self-awareness, like you said, ability to be critical and understand and adapt to change. Ability to problem solve. Someone having the right personality doesn't mean they can problem solve anything.
The
So I
first
think we
thing
need to
that
change
comes
those
out,
pieces.
yeah, but if you build on that, self-awareness, right, means that it's the first element of emotional intelligence. Because the second element is you can self-regulate. If you are not aware that you're irritable, if you're not aware that you get angry, if you're not aware that you get despondent, right, then you can't regulate it.
Who's Eric talking to here?
You understand what I'm saying there, right? Because what we've seen for many times in the game is that the group will bend and shape itself to somebody who gets angry and irritable in the game. They've learned. Remember that, Eric? I mean, we've just been gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Somebody is doing a particular challenge in the game and they want everybody to be quiet.
Yeah.
Because somebody then said, oh, you're getting irritable. And they said, yes, yes. So everybody be quiet, such and such is irritable. I'm like, what? How the whole group bends itself around somebody's inability to control and manage their own emotions. They're unable to have patience, right? They're unable to concentrate, and they have to impact everybody else around them. Go on, Eric.
No, it's more relevant to what Nick was saying just before, but I think there's also a really important thing to keep in mind is that fitting in with a group is something that, for many people, actually takes a moment to build, to construct. You have to find your place within an existing group. So assessing someone's ability to fit in well is always going to be imperfect because some people will fit in very easily with a wide variety of groups. Some people will take a bit of time to build that, but they might have that ability. they might have that ability to figure it out after a while. And what we're saying, going back to what we were saying, putting them in the game removes the environment. It puts everyone on an equal footing, as you were saying. So it kind of functions in a system where no one knows anyone, no one knows anyone's skills. So you're not putting those people at a specific disadvantage.
No, but the point that the point that maybe I'm not making it very clear because it's not something that's done often, right? Is that when you look at teams, one of the first things I'm looking at, the very first thing is,
Yeah.
and you put them under stress is, are they cool, calm, and collected?
Yeah.
When
That's
I
what
was,
I'm. Yeah, go on, Chris.
I came from the educational industry, and interviews within education are very much you're in a stimulation, you're in a classroom,
Yeah.
and then you're being interviewed by the students, and then you're being interviewed by a panel, and you have a group interview. So all of those ticks, yes, we're testing every skill you've got, because just being academic is not enough. I think it was one of my first interviews, and there was about 28 people who'd gone for this job, and I was like, wow, this is a lot of people they're testing over the course of the day. And everyone, one by one, went into their classrooms to do the practice and came out singing about how beautiful their lesson went and how everything went smoothly and they delivered everything they wanted to deliver. And I got into my classroom. So it's like, right, let's go, let's do it. And one of the observers had to intervene because of a student's behaviour. And then this student kicked off with this leadership team who had kind of pinpointed them and asked them to change and sort their behaviour. Ended up swearing at the teacher, all kicking off, hell let loose, disappeared out the classroom. I'm then not being observed by anybody because the leadership's taken this kid out. So I go back and I'm hearing all these positive stories, and I'm like, oh God, I might as well go home. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm supposed to be here till 3. And funnily enough, when I got offered the job, it was because of how I responded within the action. So a lot of it probably was advantageous to me, because they're like, you kept your calm, you did all of the right behavioural techniques, you carried on and weren't flustered. And it was
that
like,
individual got taken out and you controlled the rest of your class and still taught the majority of the kids there. I've got an interest, because I'm pushed for time as well, but I've got an interesting question then, Chris. I mean,
You're
obviously,
pushed for time on a podcast.
I am, yeah. That's it.
You want to announce to the world that you're a busy man.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do mean it like that. But
I've got things to do.
some of these people, their train journeys might only be
Are
like
you
40 minutes.
are you
never
managing
know.
and self-regulating your emotion, mate?
The thing I was going to say on that is, I've got an question. Obviously, look, we're biased. The game is not the only way you can interview for power skills. I do agree with you, Krista. I think it's, having coached the game, we use it to observe teams. Why not use it to observe potential employees? I get that. My question to you would be, how would you do it? Would you get potential employees to play the game alongside your internal teammates? Bear in mind, your teammates may have played the game previously and therefore have preconceived ideas about what is right, what is wrong, and how to achieve certain goals in the simulation, although we could drop them into a different part of it. Or would you get a number of potential employees as one team together as part of the interview, as like a group interview?
Not putting you on the spot, Krista.
yeah, I think I would go the latter, because I think there's a risk that if you bring your own team members in, that they will automatically take control, because I think within the interview situation, much more than within upskilling your existing team, they are going to have this conscious awareness that they are on interview. So
These
as
people
much
that could
as
be
it's
these
immersive,
employees.
they will still bow maybe slightly to the existing team.
What you're saying is if you put a load of potential employees in, they become competitive rather than thinking that these are my future employees. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting. We've done that. We've run assessments, etc., on groups of people, and it is fascinating because really it is a fishbowl, and you're looking at people and how they behave. And I think it was one of the German CEOs who we used to work for used to tell people when he was using it for clients and that it is the true self does come out, right? With all the bits and bobs that you want to keep hidden, because I think it's you can't hide. You can't hide anything. We talk about I'm really good at leadership and I'm really good at this, and it's like, well, there you go, off you go. It's like, what? I think one of the things that when we talk about a closed and an open learning system is what you're describing is open learning, right? It's open. It takes new information in. It doesn't have a closed loop, all right? It allows to understand strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities in the development of the progress, and that learning is not linear. It comes back, all right, around and around. As you wisely said before, Nick, that learning means that we do make mistakes, but it's from making the mistakes. I remember when I get laughed at, but when we worked for Xerox not so long ago, one of the things that we would say to clients was, measure me not on what I'm doing now, but on the maturity of how we solve big issues with you. That will be our competitive edge against your other suppliers you look at and what we can do now. And we moved heaven and earth to make sure the I remember there used to be a sort of tale coming out of the US where there was a major account salesperson back in the day would deliberately make a mistake, right? Deliberately make something go wrong so they could apologize, right? And show them how they manage that, and the customers love them, right? Because their biggest fear is not if I get this, but what happens when something goes wrong. When if I'm producing a bid that's for an oil company, and I've got 24 hours to turn it around, and I've got a machine that's producing the documents, and it goes down, and it's Friday evening, and that document has to be there on Monday for a bid that's 10 million. Who's going to help me? Well,
And
Toby turned up with a team.
it also going back to the soft skills, power skills bit, it also reminds people that you're a human, that you have faults, and that your ability to deal with them is a strength, right? It is a skill.
I think that's so important.
I think that's an interesting point there, because yes, we want to know who's going to step forward to help and resolve that issue and that problem when everything goes wrong. But I think there's also that element of who's going to understand if I say I can't, because I think we need to establish that and we went through this phase a few years ago where burnout rates were going through the roof. Everyone was overworked, particularly post COVID and stuff, during COVID and stuff, like after furlough and stuff. Everyone was going burnout. People were having to work all times of days, all times of hours, expecting like instant responses if someone messaged you at 10 o'clock at night and stuff like that. Having the awareness and ability to say, my team doesn't have to be there to solve this issue, and anyone who is there is coming out of choice to support and help the organization as a whole. But we appreciate and understand someone coming back and saying, I'm really sorry, I was out doing so and so. I'm really sorry, I was putting my kids to bed. I was really doing this. Like you said, understanding that people are humans and not machines is also the flip side of that. So it's not always about who's going to drop everything to save the business. It's who's going to have the right awareness to communicate where they can support and where they can't, and what they can do and they can't do.
I think that, and that comes back to being wise now. Because I think back in the day when we were doing it was, are you available, etc., on a call basis. But I think it was also in response to you phone up for help and you just end up in this voice message circle of never finding anybody that you can have a conversation with until it's so far past the time that you actually needed it that you've been hurt badly. So I think there's the game has changed since when I did. When I was doing that, we didn't have the level of social media and ability to communicate at all. But as we sort of bring this to an end, Eric, I'll help you bring this to an end now. Was like in summing up the role of power skills because when we talk about an interview, it's about an assessment, it's about an evaluation, it's about a dual commitment. a commitment from the person that's coming and from the team that's going on there. How would you want to wrap this up, guys? How would you want to? What would be your summation? You know, top 3 things that come to your mind. Don't
I
So
think
I've
for
got one.
me, it's not about testing for the winning person. It's not about testing for success. It's about absolutely seeing how people respond within a situation. If you hit a challenge, do you just sit there quietly and hope it's going to go away? Let's hope not. If you hit a challenge, do you go, I don't have the facilities, the knowledge, the experience to support this? Does anyone else in my team able to collaborate and help get this achieved? That's kind of what you want to be looking for, and that's where you want your people to be working, because we can't all work in silos. We do all have to move to a collaborative state, really, in order to push forward.
I think that's a brilliant way to put it, Kristen. I think
Absolutely.
for me, we always in the recruitment industry we always talk about interviews are a two-way process, right? It's both sides, both parts of the thing. Like you said, it's a dual commitment to understand whether there's a balance here and whether there's an opportunity for both parts of the person and the company to make progress. And if yes, I understand the game isn't the only way to do this stuff. I agree with Chris. I think actually, from our coaching experiences, it is a great tool that we could implement into an interview process and get some really good observability, in a very level playing field, and actually test for different things. But saying that, how do you think your future employees will think and act if they come into an interview process and they're putting in an immersive 3D game as part of their interview and learning process, rather than the standard psychometric tests, but homework tasks, and all these other kind of things that we do in the current interview process? How do you think their mentality is if that's how they start the journey at your business? They're going to come into your organization with like ideas of innovation, of actually doing things differently, actually thinking your business is above and beyond the company that asked them to do a homework task over the weekend. And I think we need to don't forget that the power of that, of the fact that we need to sell our organization to these individuals, not pick the one that we want. I think that it's important to think that side of things.
And on that note, if anyone out there listening to this has questions or comments, especially, I think for this one, interesting anecdotes about interviews and recruitment, please drop them below. Of course,
Hang on, Eric. You're
great.
dodging your summary
of
there.
course, but it's important.
Like, subscribe, comment below.
See? Exactly. He knows
it.
Thanks, everyone.
I think that was really good. I think the only thing that I would say, that just the last thing that I think that interesting that ties all of what you're talking together is that there's a new vein that's taking place of why people want to work, and I think it's about purpose and meaning, and therefore that combines with learning. And I think that if there's purpose, I think you began that actually on a conversation, Krista, where you described somebody who was making the distinction between their salary and can they learn. And I think that's where I would end this. Sorry, Eric, to hand it back to you. Was that purpose and meaning, that shared value of togetherness, is something that you're looking for as well. Not just whether they're proactive or self-starter. Those are important soft skills. I like that. Sorry, Eric.
You're fine. So we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
No,
and
no.
As Nick was saying, like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.